Hi, I'm Jack, and welcome back, because today I'm going to give you guys a review for Season 2 of Superman Lois, which just came to a close recently. It stars the cast of the series, Tyler Hoechlin, Elizabeth Tulloch, Jordan Elsass, Alex Garfin, and many more. And with that said, let's get started. I've been very excited for Season 2 to premiere ever since Season 1 came to a close, because if you saw my review for Season 1, you know how much I loved the first season. As a Superman fan, it was amazing with how it handles these characters, and it tries to do something different, especially with Superman and Lois as parents. And I really liked how they were able to tell a Superman story like that on the show. So I was really excited to see what Season 2 is going to bring, especially after the cliffhanger ending of Season 1, which, spoilers ahead for this entire review, Natalie, the daughter of John Henry Irons, just crash landed on the Kent farm. So I was really curious to just see, what will that mean for our characters going forward, and who will be our big threat? And to kick things off, I really enjoyed Season 2. It's a very worthy follow-up season to Season 1. Even though it's not on that same level as the first season, I still had a really good time with the season as a whole. It still is very well paced at 15 episodes, or every episode added to the storyline of the season. And I love our cast still. They still bring their A game here, especially Tyler Hoechlin and Elizabeth Tulloch, who continue to show me that they are one of the best iterations of Superman and Lois on screen. They have amazing chemistry with one another, and I love how they function alongside everybody else, especially with the kids played by Alex Garfin and Jordan Elsass, and so as the Cushing family and John Henry Irons and Natalie. The whole cast is really great here. When it comes to characters, I think a lot of them are done well. Some characters definitely got a lot more screen time than others this season, but some of the standout characters this season were Clark, Jordan, Talro. I love what they do with those characters, especially Talro, because even though he was the big villain of Season 1, they give him a redemption arc of sorts, and it reminds me of Loki in Thor: The Dark World, and I really like that, because I do think that he was a good character in that first season, and so I like that they're giving him a sort of a redemption arc where he sometimes helps Clark from time to time. And not only that too, but Jordan, I liked Jordan that first season, but I loved him this season. He had so much character growth. I love seeing him go from just a teenager who is just trying to learn how to use his powers, and we see so much more of that here, and he's a lot more mature, and he's out there being a hero whenever Clark's not around. And I love what they've done with him this season, from wanting Sam Lane's help and protecting his family and protecting Sarah. There are some amazing sequences that happen with Jordan, and I love what they do with him so far. And by far, one of the best characters of the season. And what can I say that hasn't already been said about Tyler Hoechlin as Superman? He is amazing. I love what the show has been able to do with him, and they really make him just one of my all-time favorite adaptations of the character. And I love how we see him, just the weight behind everything with the action sequences and his performances in certain episodes, especially in episode 10, where we see him play both Superman and even Bizarro. I thought was great. It's just really awesome to see how this show has really made me like Tyler's Superman a lot since the earlier days with him as the character. The visual effects here are still absolutely stellar to look at. As the season progresses, you see a lot of very visual effects heavy action sequences and backgrounds with space and the sun and world, and it looks amazing here, especially for the network itself. It just looks as amazing as it does in that first season. And even in the finale, there are some amazing visual effects work, and the cinematography is really good too. It really feels cinematic in sorts, with Man of Steel inspirations thrown into the mix. And I love what the visual effects crew were able to do with Superman Lois, because this season, just like the predecessor, looks fantastic. And it even makes the show feel a lot more comic booky, because you have the main world, you got the Bizarro world, and the costuming and how everything looks in terms of the palette. It looks terrific. And just like in season 1, the season continues to focus on family and how important that is and being there for one another. I really like that this season, especially where our characters are trying to stick out for others, especially with John and his girlfriend Candace and that little storyline with XK there. And so as Jordan and Sarah's relationship and the whole Cushing family storyline and even the Kents, there's a big emphasis on family this season, just like before, and it's still very well done here. And the drama for what the show is able to do, there's a lot more of it in season 2 than there is in season 1, especially on the high school side of things, but it was never over the top. It never felt like they were being too out there with its drama. It feels natural, and I love what they're able to do with these characters, especially from John, Sarah, and Jordan. I think they're done really well, especially from the cast. And it's well written too, following this time around. And alongside all of that, you also have really believable character development here, especially there are surprises every now and then with how things progress. And there are times where, again, it can get a little dramatic, but it's never gone too over the wall in terms of drama. So thankfully, season 2 still was able to have drama be just as good as it was before, but they never go too out there with it. The action sequences here are also fabulous here. Seeing the fight sequences with Superman and Bizarro and Talro and Anderson and Ali, they look awesome. Visually, still holds up, especially from the visual aspect of things, but the choreography, not only does it look cool where I can see what's going on, but it's just so awesome to just see our characters just duke it out with one another, especially when they're flying from location to location and using all their abilities is really cool. And I'm able to see what's going on. It's choreographed well, and I feel the weight behind it too, where I care about the characters that are on screen, where I want Superman and our heroes to succeed against our antagonist. And this action sequences throughout the season, they're very well choreographed and they're well shot. And visually, they're so good, and so is the weight. Because it's also important for your fight sequences to have weight, and this season has plenty of that in its fight sequences, where I care about the outcome. I care about the survival of our characters. When it comes to villains, I think Bizarre was a really great villain at the time, and I think Anderson was actually really great, which reunites Tyler Hoechlin and Ian Bohen together, who both did Teen Wolf together, so it was nice to see them play characters who oppose one another throughout the season, where Lieutenant Mitch Anderson wants Superman to be a fighter of the U.S. government, but obviously with Superman's ideals, he's not just a fighter for America, but so as the entire planet. And so I love their conflict with one another in the season, how that plays out with how Lieutenant Mitch Anderson will do whatever it takes to protect the country, stop Bizarro, and do what needs to be done, while Superman's also trying to do the same thing, but in his way. And it puts him at crosshairs with Lieutenant Mitch Anderson. I think I really like how the dynamic with those two really played out, and they both were fantastic with one another this season. Which then leads into your main villain of the season, Ali, who in the comics is an adaptation of a character known as Parasite. And how the show depicts her is she's the weakest villain of the 3 when it comes to the season. I think one of the bigger issues I have this season is, unlike season 1 where you knew who your main villains were, like you started out with John Henry Irons before you knew who John Henry Irons was. But then as the season progressed, you realized your main threat was Morgan Edge. And I think that felt more natural. But this season, you start out with Bizarro, and then it shifts over to Anderson, which then shifts over to Ali. And I don't think Ali was as compelling as a villain, especially with her cult. Not the worst villain that DC CW shows have put out there. But compared to Bizarro and Anderson, I don't think she was quite as good. There was a lot more that needed to be desired in terms of development and her cult characters that at times wasn't as fleshed out as it could, because it feels like you had a lot of these competing storylines this season, which feels like there's a lot going on here compared to that first season. So some storylines here, of course, they get a lot more focus than others, and sometimes they get more time than they should. But I think as an adaptation of Parasite, I think when she becomes Parasite, it's really cool to see what she's able to do, even if she was defeated a little too quickly in the finale, and so as with how they handle her character as a whole. Another issue I have with the season is that the Cushing family got way too much focus for the entire season. It's not a bad storyline in of themselves, but it does so at the expense of every other storyline, where we always cut back and forth to the Cushing family storyline. And seeing Lana run for mayor was nice, even though I knew what the outcome was going to be. But it never really felt like it was tying into anything related to Allie or Superman or Lois or Bizarro and Anderson and Jordan. It felt very fillery. It felt like I could have done without a lot of the screen time they received this season. The cast that plays the Cushing family were great this season, but it felt like they had way too much focus for a season that didn't really feel like their story was as crucial as everything else. And I feel like their whole storyline could have been toned down a bit. And if they tied things more into the other characters, then that would have elevated the storyline more, because it felt like this is the storyline with the most drama, aside from the story between Lois and Lucy. But this storyline with the Cushing family, even though the ideas themselves are actually pretty good, they never really felt like they amounted to anything. And so in the end, we gave a lot of focus to those characters, and it never really felt like it did all that much for the season. A third issue I have with the season, which isn't anything to do with the series, it's nothing about the story or anything, but this season kept having inconsistent breaks, and that got really annoying to the point where the momentum of the season keeps going out, because every time we go on a break after 2 episodes, we're gone for like a month, and I always feel like I'm not as invested as I should be. And I wasn't nearly as invested in the season as I was in season 1 because of the inconsistent breaks. And I feel like the network should try and do something different, where how about instead of having like 2 episodes come out in a week and then you go on break for like a month, at least how about you give them a 3-month break after mid-season, so that they will have plenty of time to film the episodes, get them done in post-production, and then you can release them week to week. Because Superman Lois Season 2, every episode mattered and is very well paced, but inconsistent breaks really kills the momentum, and it made this storyline not as investing, and it just makes me feel like I just want to see it come out so I can see what happens, because the inconsistent breaks were really hurting this season, and I really hope that they don't do that with Season 3. Overall, I loved Superman Lois Season 2. It continues to bring back what made Season 1 work so well, with great characters and some great focus on family, and so has some terrific action sequences and visual effects that are some of the best the CW network has ever put out, even if there's a lot going on with the story and some of the villains weren't quite as good as others, and you have some storylines that don't feel like they add as much to the overall season. I still had a blast with Superman Lois Season 2, and it's one of the better seasons of DC CW shows that the CW network has put out. So I really enjoyed Season 2, and I love how it wraps everything up in the end. It's just like with Season 1, where it wraps everything up nicely in the way it should, leaves the door open for some really exciting things to come in Season 3, so I cannot wait to see what comes next for the show. So in the end, I'm going to give Superman and Lois Season 2 an A-. I've given a lot of A-minuses recently. That's actually good. I've really enjoyed a lot of the stuff I've seen recently, so that's good that it's just very consistent in terms of letter grades. But now let's talk about spoilers. One of the biggest things of the season was that apparently they finally revealed the status of where in the Arrowverse is this set. And it turns out this is actually on its entire separate thing. And for me, I'm not too bothered by it. I see how the internet is unhappy with this decision. There are contradictions to be made, like in Season 1, Diggle showed up and briefly mentioned Oliver and Crisis, but then it turns out apparently Superman's your only hero on this earth, and they never explicitly referenced Supergirl or The Flash or Legends. And I, for one, am not too bothered by this personally, because the show has always been so focused on its own thing, and especially with Lucy Lane, because even though you got Jenna Dewan returning as Lucy from Supergirl Season 1, this is a very different version, because not only Crisis, but any history from Supergirl and all that stuff, pretty much non-existent with this version of the character. So I wasn't really too bothered by this decision, and I always feel like with 15 episodes, I don't know how they were going to be able to fit references or appearances from these other characters into the story. And I've always thought that the show was stronger focusing on their own stories. So that reveal was made, and it's a very controversial decision, but I am personally not too bothered by it. I actually think it's just for the best of the series, personally. And speaking of Talrow, I love that because he was the main villain of season 1, we see how Clark and him would have some scenes where it seems like we still shouldn't trust Tal. But I love that as the season progressed, he becomes, like, you see that even though he tried to take over the world and turn it into New Krypton, that he still cares about Clark and his family because Clark is his half-brother. And he's like the only piece of family that Tal has left. So I love Adam Rayner, like, getting to return as Morgan Edge as a recurring character in season 2 to be more of an ally this season. I think that is awesome to see him fight alongside Clark Kent when it comes to Allie Elston. I think that is really cool. And I love what they do with them in terms of their dynamic. And it really makes Talrow an even better character. And it's interesting because in the end, last time we see him, he's apparently now on the Bizarro world. So I'm really curious to see what that means for the character. Is he going to show up again? Is he going to still be an ally of sorts of the Clark now, especially after the ending? Or is he going to go back to his villainous ways? I have no clue, and I'm really curious to see what more they might do with the character. Jordan and Sarah have a storyline this season where apparently Sarah kissed a girl at camp and told Jordan about this, and it caused some relationship difficulties. And I, for one, that's a good idea for them to have some conflict in the storyline, but I did feel like it wasn't quite as investing as before, and I feel like it didn't really feel like it amounted too much with those two characters, especially as not only with Jordan and Sarah, but so as with Jordan and him trying to be a much more mature person and learning how to use his powers. And by the way, seeing Jordan learn to fly was awesome. He is really one of the MVPs of the season. I love what they've done with his character. But the idea with Jordan and Sarah's relationship that happened there, it didn't feel like it did as much for the season. And at times it feels like it got brushed off at points so that we can focus on the whole Cushing family storyline where Kyle had an affair. So it was a fine idea, but I never really felt like it was as investing as the other storylines this season. But I did like that in the end, that Sarah finds out that Jordan is half Kryptonian, that he has powers, and that was a good reveal. And I like the episodes where we got to see Bizarro World with Bizarro John, Bizarro Lana, and Bizarro Lois, and how it's a very apocalyptic world with Allie, and how two worlds, you got to merge them as one. Could have been fleshed out more. I think that the Lucy and Lois storyline I think was good, but I didn't think they gave Lois as much to do this season as in the first season. But I do think that there are some great moments there, and I love what they were able to do with Elizabeth Tulloch and Jenna Dewan in terms of those characters. So I'm happy that in the end, they had a nice resolution where she's free from Allie, and I'm just really curious to see what they're going to do with that in the future. And not only does Sarah find out that Jordan has powers, but Lana finds out that Clark is actually Superman, as Clark chose to reveal his identity to Lana, and I thought that was a really great step forward. I also love what the show has done with John Henry Irons. I love that he starts off as a villain who wants to kill Superman, but then as season 1 progressed, he became an ally, and in this season, he's just a good guy who Natalie's now on our Earth, and they're reunited, and so as dealing with what's happening with Allie and Bizarro, and just being around the Clark Kent and Lois family, and I think that is really great. I love what they do with John Henry Irons. I think he is a great ally to our characters. I love how he's trying to protect his daughter, especially in this new world and this grave new threat that they're facing, and I like that, and I really felt nervous for our characters because there were moments where I thought John Henry Irons was going to die, and I really cared for his character because I love how he changed ever since the pilot episode, and it really felt earned that these things happened to his character in a way that feels right, that I cared, that there's emotion put into it, and Natalie's a great new addition. I love her dynamic with both John Henry Irons and even John and Jordan Kent. I love that bond that those characters have developed with one another and makes them very worthy additions to the cast. And then John Kent has a storyline where he gets involved with his girlfriend with XK and drugs. And I love how the season tackles this like this is a bad thing, because it is. And I love how we see consequences for John's actions. So we see John wants to be better because unlike Jordan, he doesn't have abilities himself. So he's more on Lois's side of things than Clark's, and how he wants to prove himself to the high school football team. He wants to be better. He wants to be the greatest football player on the team. And you see how his actions affect everyone else and that he learned to be better. And even though at times I feel like that was a tad too dramatic at points, it never lost me entirely. And I think that as a whole, I love that with his character, that even if he wasn't as investing as, say, Jordan this season, I love that as the season progresses, that we got to see this where it was shown how bad this was for him to be doing, and that in the end he makes up for it, and that he and Candace are now in a better place. But then I do feel like they could have tackled a little bit more on it, because once we got to Bizarro World, once all that comes into play, it feels like that was brushed off to the side. So the end result of what they do with John this season is satisfying, but there are some amazing episodes this season. The Inverse Method, tried and true, 30 Days and 30 Nights. It is an season full of amazing, amazing episodes, especially when we see one where Superman left for the other world, and we got to see a whole episode where it's been a whole month, and how does the world live without Superman? So we see how important he is, and that Superman is the world's mightiest hero, and he is the most powerful, and how do they function without Superman around there to protect them? I really like that episode a lot, and there's some phenomenal acting from Elizabeth Tulloch, who is one of the best versions of Lois Lane, alongside Erica Durance from Smallville. And love what they do with those characters and those side of things. And even Sam Lane, even though he retired at the end of season 1, I do like that he came back as a character in season 2, and I still like what they do with him a lot. What was crazy to me this season, though, was when Allie took Clark's powers, deeming him absolutely powerless. And that made me so surprised, as it really shows you how powerful Parasite is. And it was so satisfying with the character of Allie, because even if she wasn't a great villain, I love that when she finally becomes Parasite, that's when I really started to warm up to her character a lot more. And I love that we really see how powerful of a threat she is with how she brainwashed people into following her and thinking we need to merge both worlds and become whole, complete. And seeing her drain Superman's powers was crazy. So seeing him get his powers back was awesome from a visual standpoint, from a story standpoint, and even from a character standpoint, that he is willing to put his life on the line, even if he dies trying, so that he can save the world as Superman once again. And I love how it progresses characters like Jordan and Talro, just in that point where Talro, despite all the things he did in season 1, he still shows that he cares about Clark, and he cares about the family, and he cares about them so much, even with his villainous ways, that I love that Talro and Clark, they went up all the way to the sun, and he tosses him into the sun, where we see him get so much power so that he can get his abilities back. And it's so satisfying to watch him take down Allie and save our world from the inverse world and merging. That is so awesome. And I love how they are able to do that. Even if the villain was defeated pretty easily, very satisfying way to wrap things up on that end. And it was just a very satisfying moment for Superman. And then season 3 teases where Lois and Clark are, of course, back together again after Lois is stuck in the inverse world. And Lana and Kyle will probably no longer be the couple they once were because of all of that. But at least Kyle is trying to do better. And then we see John Diggle. He meets John Henry Irons and tells him about a Bruno Mannheim and Intergang, which teases them as the villains of season 3, which I'm so excited to see. And Clark, Lois, Jordan, and Jonathan, they are out in the middle of nowhere in the ocean on a boat, and they create a new Fortress of Solitude that won't be just a fortress for Clark, but for the whole family. And then the season ends. I really enjoyed the season. Not as amazing as that first season. It's not as good. The story may not be as good as the first season, but I still really enjoyed the season as a whole. It's a nice and fun piece of TV, and I'm super excited to see where the show goes next with season 3. Hopefully it's as good as the first 2. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Superman and Lois Season 2. What are your thoughts on the season? Let me know down below in the comment section. I'd love to hear it. And which season did you prefer, Season 1 or Season 2? I'm a Season 1 person, even though I still love Season 2. But I'd love to know down below, what are your thoughts on the season? And let me know down below. And stay tuned. I have a review for The Flash Season 8 coming up soon as the season comes to a close tonight. So I hope you guys will stay tuned for that. Don't forget to follow me on social media. My username is down below at the bottom of the screen and in the description below. So please go do that while you're at it. And thank you guys so much for watching. And don't forget to hit that like button and the subscribe button and stay tuned for more.